Picture the deep sea for a second. Chances are you're picturing a dark, rocky ocean floor, jagged canyons, maybe a cave with something glowing and toothy just out of sight. That image is everywhere. In documentary trailers, video game levels, every scariest ocean creature video on this platform. But it's wrong, and not just a little exaggerated. The spot you're picturing is actually one of the emptiest places in the entire ocean. So if you've ever imagined a deep-sea monster crawling along the bottom of a trench, you've been looking in the wrong place this whole time. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where these animals really live, and it's not where you think. This isn't really your fault. Almost every deep-sea creature you've ever seen on screen was filmed the same way. A camera rig gets lowered down, it lands on the seafloor, and it waits. Whatever swims past the lens becomes the footage. So naturally, almost every documentary shot of the deep sea shows a creature near the floor, simply because that's where the camera happened to be sitting. That's finally starting to change. Newer tools, like autonomous underwater gliders and cameras tagged directly onto sperm whales, let researchers follow animals through open water instead of waiting on the bottom for something to swim by. But the old footage only ever told you where the camera was sitting, not where these animals actually spend their lives. To understand that, we have to go back to World War II, when the US Navy stumbled onto something it couldn't explain. When sonar became standard equipment on Navy ships around 1942, operators picked up something strange. Every day, their equipment detected a solid seafloor sitting around 300 to 500 meters down. At night, that same seafloor rose closer to the surface. Solid ground doesn't move, so either the ocean floor was somehow breathing, or something else was going on entirely. Sailors called it the phantom bottom. Some blamed faulty equipment. Some thought it was an enemy device built to jam their sonar. And this wasn't a one-off report. Sonar crews found the same false floor in ocean after ocean, all over the planet. For years, nobody could explain it. The mystery was well known enough that the biologist Rachel Carson wrote about it in her best-selling book, calling it one of the ocean's stranger unsolved puzzles. Then, in 1945, a marine biologist named Martin Johnson worked it out. It wasn't a seafloor at all. It was trillions of small fish, shrimp and jellyfish, packed so densely that they reflected sound waves like solid ground. They migrate for a simple reason. Near the surface at night, there's food. But staying up there during the day means getting picked off by anything that can see. So the whole layer rises after dark to feed, then sinks back into the safety of darkness before the sun comes up. Scientists now call it the deep scattering layer, and it's often described as the largest daily migration of life on the planet. That layer lives inside a part of the ocean scientists call the mesopelagic zone, or more simply, the twilight zone. But to understand where that sits, you need the bigger picture. The ocean isn't one big empty tub. It's split into layers, based on how much light gets through. Down to about 200 meters is the sunlight zone. Enough light gets through for plants and algae to grow, and this is where most of the sea life you already know about lives. Below that, from around 200 to 1,000 meters, is the twilight zone. Some light gets in, just not enough for photosynthesis. Only around a fifth of the food produced up in the sunlight zone ever makes it down this far, and only a fraction of that survives the journey beyond it. This is where the deep scattering layer lives, and it's also where a lot of the animals you picture as deep sea monsters actually spend most of their time. Below that is the midnight zone, completely dark, running from about 1,000 down to 4,000 meters. Only after all of that do you finally reach the ocean floor itself, the abyssal plain, sometimes miles below the surface. Here's the part that surprises most people. Nearly all of that is open water. There's no floor to stand on, no walls, just an enormous three-dimensional space stretching in every direction. The actual bottom is only that last, thin layer at the very end. Where do the famous creatures actually live inside all that open water? Start with the one everyone already knows the shape of, the anglerfish. Round black body, needle teeth, a glowing lure dangling off its head like a lantern. A certain animated fish movie put one in a cave, sitting still, waiting to ambush a couple of clownfish. That scene got the location wrong. The anglerfish species with the glowing lure, the ones people actually picture, aren't cave dwellers at all. Species like the black cedarville spend their entire lives drifting alone in open water, hundreds to thousands of meters down, never touching the bottom. They're also a lot smaller than people expect. Most of these glowing anglerfish only grow to about 5 inches, roughly the size of your hand. The 4-foot monster version people picture is a completely different, shallow water relative called a monkfish, and it lives near the coastal seafloor, not in the deep sea at all. That drifting, solitary lifestyle explains one of their strangest features too. Finding another anglerfish in that much empty water is rare, so in some species, once a male finally finds a female, he bites on and never lets go. Their bodies fuse together, and he spends the rest of his life attached to her as a permanent, built-in mate. There are anglerfish that live on the seafloor. Sea toads and batfish crawl along the bottom on fin tips that look almost like little legs, but they don't glow. They flick a small fleshy lure instead of a lit one, and they're not the ones in your mental image at all. The scary, glowing one drifts in open water. The seafloor dweller isn't trying to be scary at all. The anglerfish isn't a one-off. The giant squid follows the exact same pattern. For decades, people assumed it hunted along canyon walls or crept across the seafloor, mostly because that's how it's always been drawn. But tracking data from sperm whale dives, plus the handful of live sightings we have, point somewhere else entirely. Giant squid appear to spend most of their time drifting in open water, somewhere between 300 and 1,000 meters down. The first ever footage of a live giant squid in its natural habitat wasn't captured until 2012, and when researchers finally got it, the animal was suspended in open water, exactly where the tracking data said it should be. Nobody has ever filmed one resting on the bottom. Same story for the colossal squid, its even larger cousin down in the Southern Ocean. This is where it gets genuinely wild. In 2014, a research ship called the Malaspina circled the entire planet, taking sonar readings of the twilight zone the whole way. Scientists had estimated that layer held around 1 billion tons of fish. The new data suggested it was closer to 10 billion tons, maybe more. That would make the open water of the twilight zone the largest concentration of fish, by weight, anywhere on Earth. Not the coral reefs, not the continental shelves everyone fishes, but an empty-looking stretch of open water that most viewers have probably never heard of. Here's the actual correction. When you picture the deep sea, you don't need to picture the floor at all. The floor, the abyssal plain, is one of the emptiest habitats on the planet. Food has to drift down from the surface as marine snow, tiny scraps of debris, and by the time it sinks 4 kilometers, there's barely anything left. Researchers who study it describe the floor as food-limited, with some of the sparsest life in the entire ocean. There's one exception. Around hydrothermal vents, where mineral-rich water pours out of the seafloor, life explodes into some of the densest concentrations found anywhere on the planet. But those vents are rare, scattered points on an otherwise empty floor. They're not the norm. The real activity, the huge numbers, the creatures that make people picture the deep sea as full of monsters, all of that is happening above the floor, in open water, in a zone most people have never even been told exists. You've been looking in the wrong place, not because you were careless, but because almost everything you've ever seen about the deep sea was filmed at the one spot that has the least going on. Next time you watch a deep sea documentary, notice where the camera actually is. If it's sitting still on the seafloor waiting, remember, that's the empty room. The real activity is happening somewhere in the dark water above it, drifting, migrating, and mostly never coming anywhere near the bottom at all. That rocky floor, those jagged canyons you pictured at the start of this video, they're real. They're just not where the story is. There's one more piece of this that's even stranger. Almost everything living in that open water column glows, and not for the reason you'd assume. That's a mystery for another time.